And welcome to another edition of Quoth the Raven, Lewis Bright Raven. This is Season 2, Episode 24 for June 11th, 2020. Our topic this evening, our theme will be about discussing the recent departure of DC Comics from Diamond Distribution. I know it's a topic that's been talked about quite a bit this past week, but a lot of people really haven't covered it the same way I'm going to. So hopefully I'll be able to put in some more information for people who might be a little bit tired of hearing about it. And I understand that it's been kind of beaten to death the past week. But before we do that, we need to get to our usual announcements. This episode of Quoth the Raven is in accordance with the new COPPA regulations and is intended for ages 16 and up. While some of the content we will feature is kid-friendly, the context of our episode and our show is to address and educate older teens and adults to inform them of said content for them to research as consumers in service of their youth. In other words, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, teachers, librarians, and others. There is the possibility of adult language present on the episode as well, rated TV 16 and up. Now, we're going to go ahead and go straight into the questions this week. And our first question of the evening is from John Norris of South Carolina, one of our regulars. He says, since you just reviewed the Justice League Dark movie, it reminded me of a question I wanted to ask. Have you seen DC's recently canceled Swamp Thing series? And if so, what did you think of it? Well, we're going to cover that a little bit later in the show, John. And today is John's birthday, so wish him a happy birthday as well, if you would, please, if you come in during the live show. And, I'll talk about it a little bit more at length when we go to review, but yes, I've seen it. I saw it months ago, and I thought I'd reviewed it on the show, but I went back and looked on all the episodes, and it wasn't there. But I don't know why. I thought I reviewed it, but oh well. I enjoyed it quite a bit. In fact, I've enjoyed most of the DC Universe streaming service shows. Kind of ticked off that they're getting rid of those and put them on HBO Max, even though I didn't actually watch them on DC Universe. I watched them by getting the DVD sets later. But But we'll talk about it at length a little bit later in the show. Mm-hmm. Our next question is from Santos, another one of our regular viewers from Round Lake, Illinois. Obviously, the big question to be asking is, what do you think of DC's Comics decision to cut ties with Diamond Distributors, and what do you think it can mean for the comics industry moving forward? We're going to go into a little bit of the history of that and why DC did it and everything. But as far as moving forward into the industry, it really depends on how serious retailers are going to take it. I'll go into a little more in depth with that when we talk about things at length, but DC's not the only one doing this. Alterna moved out of Diamond. There's other companies that are going to be doing the same. Don't be surprised if there's a complete reshuffling of the deck of distribution over the next 6 to 18 months in the industry. So this is just like one step of it. And like I said, we'll talk about it in depth a little bit later in the show. Our next question is from Angela, South Carolina. What do you think of Black creators using a Black Lives Matter meme as a means to coax people into supporting their careers, i.e. hire Black writers? That solve a lot of problems. I'm available, hashtag BLM by Brandon Easton on June 5th, 2020 on his Facebook page. She was very specific. Um, Probably she figured I'd know what she was talking about because I'm friends with Brandon. Um, I think that there's a lot of them are doing that sort of thing. And no, I'm not too thrilled about it. I'm actually kind of annoyed by that. It's I don't see what giving you more work is going to. How is that going to help Black Lives Matter? What, you're not going to be out in the street so the cops can't get you because you're going to be at home working? Just um, but and it kind of annoys me when it's from people who I know already have established assignments and enough to be making a reasonable living. Um, so we'll be a little bit annoyed by that, but at the same time, you kind of have to brush it off because right now the Black community is in a very sensitive and emotional state due to recent events, and it's not like this is the first time that Black creators don't say, "Hey, give me more work." They do it all the time, so it's you just kind of just shrug your shoulders and blow it off. Chris W. from Ontario, Canada asks, "Did you hear that Bendis is leaving Superman soon? What are your thoughts about this?" Well, he said something to that effect in an interview, but realistically, he's not leaving any time in the foreseeable future. He has since corrected that information. So I don't think any of us need to be concerned with it if, but at the same time, in general, with any writer or artist, if they're leaving a book, they're leaving a book. I mean, it's not the end of the world one way or the other. Um, as far as the corporation owned characters are concerned. Um, I just, it's there. If when he leaves, you know, um, I'm kind of the mindset that a lot of the creators, writers can leave the books and be replaced by somebody else. I'd rather be reading. So it's you know, whatever he does, leave Superman, find something else to do. I'm sure he won't be out of work. So no big deal. Next question. Anonymous asks, "Okay, let's say I'm ready to quit DC Comics as a reader over this recent distributor situation. What comics would you recommend to me to replace the DC books I currently read, and where and how would I get them?" Well, the person who asked was male, but he didn't want to use his name. And the reality is that answering that question is an individual case by case basis because everybody has different tastes. And are you really looking for replacements for the titles you're reading that are analogous to those characters? Like if you leave Batman titles, do you want a Batman-esque replacement book, or do you just want another superhero book? Um, and John says good evening and thanks to Mark for the birthday greeting. That was from earlier. And then Ted Davies has entered the room and says hello. Hello, everyone. But the thing is, there are basically analogies for most of the superhero characters from Marvel and DC. You can walk away from Marvel and DC anytime you want. And if you really look around the market, not just in the diamond market, but in the print-on-demand industry, particularly over at Indie Planet, there's a lot of superhero stuff that will replace the DC Marvel characters, no problem. Case in point, I said Batman. Christopher Mills does a book called Sleuth Comics with the Black Owl. That's a Batman type character. And, the guys I had earlier in this season, Barry Gregory and Stephen Butler. Stephen wasn't on. Thomas Floramonte, who inks sometimes for Stephen, was on. But their whole Gallant Comics line with Miniature Man and John Amon, Amazing Man, and all those characters are really DC Marvel archetype type characters that were golden age before even Marvel and DC were big in the Silver Age. So, there's stuff out there. So it's a matter of just what you're looking for, and it comes on an individual basis. So, I don't want to say, well, if you like Batman, pick this. If you like X-Men, pick that type thing necessarily. But I mean, even the people that we've had, like Mark Andrew Smith's Gladstone School for War Conquerors, can easily take the place of a New Mutants or a Teen Titans or any of those type of books. So again, there's plenty of alternatives out there. Next question, if we have any. I think that was the last one. We'll check real quick. Yep, that was our last question for the week. So if you have questions, you can email them to quoththeravenlbr72@gmail.com. Subject QTR questions. Please indicate whether or not you want your name and locale read on air. Now, last week we had 2 comic giveaways. One was for Just Nocturnal Commissions #1. You were supposed to email me with the code phrase VAMP, and I was going to have a drawing. Only one person did it, and that was the birthday boy, John Norris. So congratulations, you have won a copy of Nocturnal Commissions. And that will be either sent to you, or since you live here locally in the area, and you have other stuff to get picked up, we'll have to just meet and get you your stuff. As far as the other giveaway last week, the 3-book set of Nocturnal Commissions 1, Kid Nefarious, and Wonderland #1, nobody entered that contest, so no one's won this week. And we'll do it again in the future. I'm not going to do it this week, but we'll try again. So for those of you who are my regular watchers, tell your friends if they need to come watch, if they want to get some free stuff. That's the point. John says yay. But so that is our situation for our drawings from last week. And so let's go ahead and get into our topic of discussion. And that is the truth about the DC Diamond situation. Okay? A lot of people have been talking about it last week. A lot of there's been some truths coming out and some partial truths, but not everything that is pertinent to what's actually happened and why it happened has been brought to the forum. And I don't know why that hasn't happened, other than certain people don't want to get embarrassed. But we're going to do what we can here and get people up to speed. DC gave notice to Diamond back in February of this year that the terms between the two companies were planning to be terminated after their contract was expired on May 1st of 2020. Do not let Steve Jeppe or any other Diamond representative lie to you otherwise and claim that this was some sort of shock event that came from out of nowhere. They've known about this, and they knew it even back before February. We'll get into that. Former DC Entertainment president Diane Nelson has hinted at this from her observations when she was recently interviewed about DC's departure from the distributor, while claiming she's not privy to the group goings-on anymore because she's no longer with the company for plausible deniability. But I think we all know full well that she knows inside baseball at the company. And this is what she had to say. I'm afraid I've not been privy to this recent decision. I can say purely as a private individual that Diamond has for a long time been unwilling or unable to modernize and support and grow the biz as needed for a healthy direct channel. And Diamond may not even be solvent. Diamond in parentheses is my addition to clarify that statement. She continues, it would be imprudent for any publisher to not have a distribution contingency plan. I'm disappointed by the communications rollout of, it's supposed to be of the decision. I'm mistyped. And it seems, from my admittedly removed and limited point of view, that it's not nearly robust enough and to not have offered retailers sufficient notice and explanation as to what I'm sure is a reasonable and probably even advantageous decision for them, meaning DC and retailers alike. I'm clarifying again. It's never good for any company to have a monopoly on a business, and Diamond has had one for too long. I'm optimistic DC will help retailers understand how to navigate the transition. And I would guarantee, but as I say, I'm not privy to this, that there's no way that DC or Warner Brothers have a financial stake in these distributors. And there's reasons for her to think that. The reason Diane Nelson says this is because DC has been planning to leave Diamond for the past 3 years. That's the information that nobody wants to let you know, that they've been talking about this departure for that long. They were planning on announcing the departure later this year and for the actual distribution to begin in 2021. But what happened with the pandemic and Diamond's lack of payment to their vendors, to DC, is what spurred this early reaction, shall we say. But we'll go a little bit further. Like I said, they started in 2017. Now, I've had this confirmed from multiple representatives that this is what DC's plan was, who have subcontracts with DC and Diamond. They're representatives from Ingram Content Group in Tennessee and BCH Fulfillment and Distribution, who have delivered DC content to library and schools for decades. They confirmed this to me. And as Nelson said, or says, there doesn't seem to be any financial stake from DC in either of these two distributors. And that would be incredibly foolish for them to put financial stake into those businesses, in my opinion, given that AT&T already shut down and sold off their distributor brands when they bought the company because of the steep overhead expenditures in their first place. They're already, I can't even tell you how much debt AT&T Time Warner is in, but it's a ginormous amount. It's just ridiculous. So they don't want to create more debt for themselves, given the huge debt the overall company has currently. But because they've been doing this since 2017, we could have had no pandemic, no Trump in office, no Black Lives Matter, no bullshit going on. And DC still would have likely announced their break from Diamond by San Diego Con this year, which would have been another month or so from now. And this has been inferred by Nelson. This has been inferred by both of the reps from Ingram and the BCH rep I talked to. So that's 4 people from 3 different sources that have direct connection to DC and would probably know what's going on, or have had connection to DC directly and would know what was going on. Now, like I said, if Diamond just paid their bills instead of withholding payment to the publishers like they did, DC would have held an extension with Diamond through the end of the year and launched their separate distribution in 2021. That would have given everybody from July until the end of the year to set up their distribution, and retailers still would have thrown a hissy fit. We know they would have, because that's what retailers do. I'm sorry, but it's truth. But at least they would have had what they would perceive as a reasonable time to prepare and comparative what is the situation. But Diamond didn't do that. And granted, they didn't just do this to DC, they did this to everybody. But remember, AT&T is literally like, I don't know, some multiple billions of dollars in debt right now. Okay. So AT&T considered Diamond's actions to be done in bad faith, and that was the end of it. So either way, we would have seen this story come out of either now as we have or out of San Diego Con this year. And these signs have been there with AT&T and DC restructuring for the past 12 months now. You think firing Dan DiDio and the culling of the 5G line wasn't all part of this? It's intertwined. It's all there. This is all stuff that's going on behind the scenes. And now everything looks like this is some sort of freaky spur-of-the-moment situation. Everybody wants to paint DC as this horrible entity who are making bad business decisions, when in truth, this has been going on for the last 2-3 years in the making, and everybody's panicking anyway. If this had been properly reported and covered and explained that this was going on last summer, like it should have been, and because people in the comic news scene heard rumblings about that far back, retailers could have been prepared, even with the pandemic situation at hand. Now, would it be preferable for them to have everything already in place and running before they pulled the trigger and left Diamond? Certainly. Would it have been better were it not happening in the middle of a pandemic? Absolutely, sure. But is it DC's fault that Diamond pulled this stunt? No. And can't people see that with Diamond not paying our publishers, that this was assigned to Diamond, or assigned to DC, that Diamond is not solvent as a company anymore, which Nelson said in her interview. With that in mind, would any of you sit around waiting to be paid, questioning if or when or you're going to get paid, or would you move on as quickly as possible to establish alternative channels? I think most of us can agree we would have gone and done what DC did. In fact, the matter is they probably should have been doing it and getting it all set up, even leading into the departure, instead of expanding and waiting till the end of the year, which is what I'm told was the plan. But I think they should have done it sooner anyway. But, Jeppy and them were trying to negotiate until this non-payment situation came about. And I think that, that was nail in the coffin. Mm-hmm. So, the other thing is all these idiot retailers who are whining incessantly about Lunar, and it's not DCBS, it's UCS, pardon me, distributors, and how they're sublets of major established comic store chains, and it's giving the competitor an advantage, and other complaints. Fact, just about every comic distributor ever started out as a retailer in this business, including Diamond. Jeppy owned 4 comic shops in Baltimore, Maryland, when he expanded into distribution, and still owns at least 2 stores, not to mention owning a comics company, publishing company, also Gemstone Publishing, which would not be in direct interference or direct advantage for his publishing company versus everybody else who goes through Diamond. I'm so sure he pays himself. I mean, this is reality. If you think about this, we all have to pay fees to get our advertising and revenue pages in our catalog, and we all have to pay fees to be accepted. Well, he already owns it. He already owns the distributor. What does he do? Put the money in his left pocket and put it in his right pocket? Or does he just not bother paying? If he's not bothering paying, isn't that an unfair advantage? There you go. So, why are you retailers, these retailers are going to have advantage over me? Please. So this is an irrelevant argument, no matter how much the current crop of retailers want to throw a hissy about it. That's one thing that has been bothering me for the last week, is the Brian Hibbses and the Chuck Rosanskis of the world just rah, 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 rah. It's like, shut up. They don't have any advantage over you. If you want to have an advantage over them, go get stuff that Diamond doesn't even carry. There's plenty of options. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. And we've talked about that before as well, but we're going to get into it again. Gary Groth, the Fantagraphic Books. You may know he's a publisher. He also does the Comics Journal magazine. And he covered the distributor wars of the 90s, and he points this out. And this is coinciding with what I've been talking about here. All the distributors in the 80s and early 90s carried the same comics, and there were no exclusivities back then. Well, there were, but nothing from the major publishers. So retailers could buy all their comics from a single distributor. There was about a 99% overlap among distributors. That's not exactly accurate either. We'll get to that in a moment. So there were Diamond retailers and Capital City retailers and Friendly Frank retailers and so on. And people need to realize there was about 13 different distributors back then. And many retailers established a loyalty to their distributor of choice. Some retailers had accounts with multiple distributors, but usually only to get the few comics that one of the distributors handled that others didn't. You'd have to be pretty hardcore to do that. Well, a lot of the best shops were that hardcore, to be honest with you. Almost every top-notch comic shop I knew in that era used at least 2 and sometimes 3 distributors, because it wasn't 99%. It was more closer to 85 to 95% overlap. There was a lot of underground black and white and indie books that were specifically to regional distributors rather than Diamond, because Diamond didn't support indies and really never has. Anyway, he says, I don't know what everyone's complaining about. It seems like a good time for DC to change distributors. We have plague, racial strife, Trump. Why not add destabilizing the Diamond comics market to them? He said the comic market. I put Diamond in there as a clarification. Destabilizing the comics market into the mix. And when you think about it, why not indeed? Because the industry as a whole has been destabilizing itself, not just with this particular incident, but for a better part of the past 5 or 10 years, especially as we've seen the growth of digital comics and print on demand and now the crowdfunding. So there's a lot of destabilization. What DC is actually trying to do by leaving Diamond is to create an alternative to create normalization of the market, not destabilization. Because if they can get people to support these other distributors, then all this other content that Diamond doesn't carry is going to have to be carried by Diamond, because they just lost a bunch of content that was their stock. And these other distributors can't be exclusive DC distributors either, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Like I said, Gary oversimplified it. But the big problem is that for the past 25 years, comics retailers have been good little suck-ups to Steve Geppi and the Big Two, and they don't want to deal with change. They've had multiple options for new distributors and old distributors, for that matter, before this, and they've refused to back them. They basically let Milton Greep's Capital Comics distribution rot and get absorbed by Diamond. They didn't support Haven, United, Penguin Palace, Last Gasp, and multiple other distros all throughout the 90s and early to mid-2000s. Their main excuse for this behavior was the stupid exclusivity deal with Diamond, and claiming that there wasn't enough content for these distributors to offer them without the DC Marvel content, which is not true at all, but that was their excuse. They've largely rejected the print-on-demand and much of the crowdfunded market's content as well. Part of the reason Indie Planet and Lulu.com are print-on-demand stores and not distributors themselves is because the retailers flat out refused to do business with them back in 2002 and 2003, demanding that the publisher vendors who were working with these companies go through Diamond. Now, I've gone and extensively discussed this in previous episodes. Back in April, literally about 2 months ago, when we had Barry Gregory on the show, co-founder of IndiePlanet.com, and we had him as a guest, and we explained that a little bit. So if you guys missed that episode for some reason, I know the people who are watching live didn't, you're my regulars, but for those of you who are watching for the first time, feel free to go check out that episode for an expanded discussion about that history so we don't repeat ourselves here. Now, truthfully, between the digital platforms like Comixology and Webtoons, print-on-demand groups like IndiePlanet, Lulu.com, and Amazon Direct, and the crowdfunding platforms like Patreon, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, among others, we're all collectively literally 10 times larger than the entirety of the Diamond market. And most of that content is largely not available to comic specialty stores because we're not with Diamond. This is an active choice that retailers have embraced and upheld for decades. This is where the industry is failing. It has nothing to do with, oh my God, DC's going to screw up and be a hero's world situation. Because what DC's actually trying to do is get the gears spinning again so that we can have these other stuffs to get this other content in here and normalize the market for everybody. And it's going to benefit them to be the first ones in the door to do it, because those companies, pardon me a second, we got a private message from Nick Cagnetti, but he's going to listen later. He's he's busy usually on these at this time of the day, but so he'll be watching later. We'll see you then, Nick. But anyway, as I was saying, lost my train of thought. Pardon me. Without these, with DC taking the lead with this, they're still going to have an advantage over everybody else, just like they did when they monopolized with Diamond the first time. But they're not going to have an ownership clause like they did with Diamond, which they did have at one time, to be a partial owner of the company. And they're not going to have a financial stake in it because neither Midtown Comics, which I think is who UCS is, I don't know. One of them's Midtown is either UCS or the other one, but they're two major couple comic book stores. They don't have the resources that would dictate that. Okay. So, we got the retailers complaining about this, and I just, they expect us to feel sorry for them, and I just don't see it. So DC's doing what's needed to be done for at least the past 20 years, forcing the hand, rebuilding distribution channels so that it's not just DC, but eventually all this content that Diamond's not carrying. So if Diamond's losing 30% of their stock that they had because DC bailed, they're going to have to look elsewhere for content after all. So that might mean an opening of the doors for all of us that are crowdfunding that used to be with Diamond, that didn't get support from retailers. Maybe that stuff comes back into Diamond, and now maybe retailers, since they don't want to deal with DC, will be more open-minded. I don't know. It would be nice, but we'll see. There's also a lot of content that maybe you can start picking up the content that Indie Planet and Lulu.com have that aren't even available in comic shops right now. That's what Diamond can be doing right now, instead of worrying about what DC is or isn't going to do. And as for these new distributors, that are so-called DC exclusive, they're not going to last just selling DC products any more so than Marvel did when it was just with Heroes World in the mid to late 1990s, unless they want a repeat performance of the Heroes World debacle, which I don't think AT&T DC want that. So they're going to have to expand and include other content as well. So in the long run, what DC's doing is a step in the right direction. And, sorry that we can't all be at the final destination where everybody's, up and running and set up with a snap of one's fingers. Where's Thanos when you need him? Oh, wait, he's Marvel. He wouldn't do it anyway. So, that's the thing. We can't just have it all preset. And we never did have a preset when we started in history. And when Phil Suling and the other regional distributors built the direct market in the late 70s, and Milton Greep and Steve Jeffy when he was forming Diamond in the 80s, this is how it was built, was piece by piece, slowly over the span of about 10 or 12 years. We don't have that kind of time to do that, but we didn't have the resources we do today through the internet and through other channels that we have technologically speaking. So it shouldn't take us that long. But we do need to get it done. And we can't be sitting there fighting over it and we're trying to resist it like we have ever since Diamond monopolized back in '95. Now, retailers need to pay attention. It isn't just DC. Alternatives left Diamond. Scout Comics has established direct distribution from them to retailers and even has a new comics vending machine you can have for your store. I'll just show you a picture right there for it. So this is not just DC examining the market and looking to make changes. This is an industry looking very much as itself as a whole and not liking the brokenness of the direct market system in today's world. Maybe it worked really well in the 70s and 80s and even into the 90s, but right now it's kind of a cluster and a big mess, and we have to get it straightened out. Here's some other interesting information that you need to consider about Diamond as well. Information that isn't commonly known or considered. So let's go ahead and do that. And that is Rich Johnston, who sometimes does know what he's talking about from Bleeding Cool. He observes that the other aspect of Diamond plays much more of a role in the direct market than just as a distributor. The reason why so many comic shops owe them such fealty is because Diamond often keeps comic stores alive by operating as a de facto bank. They give them extended terms to many a store to prevent them from going out of business. If sales are low and the big accounts can't pay, what happens if DC comes to collect from UCS and Lunar? Will they have cash on hand to pay DC and float default accounts or not? Chances are they don't. And if it all goes south with those companies, what pressure will they be able to bring to bear if those shops can still get product? You know, the Midtown Comics and whoever else own the other branch. What can DC do to bring any power to force this when they can still get all their other stuff from Diamond, 75% of their store product? And this is a valid point brought up by Johnston, but as I keep trying to explain to him and everyone else, Diamond doesn't carry shit. The entire catalog is only 8% of all comics produced in the U.S. Losing 38% of 8%, or 30% of 8% is like 2.35%. So they'd be carrying 5 point something percent with these two companies and carrying less than 1% of the actual product line out there. There's really not, even though there's a big amount of dollar figure, the actual market share percentages are practically non-existent because of how much stuff is outside of Diamond that can be now brought back into the direct market if they use their common sense and actually go to work and do it, which bring more dollars into the market. It'll bring more diversity, not just in terms of content or creators or what have you, but it would bring you more financial security because no one's going to have to be reliant upon that distributor for DC or this distributor for Diamond or this distributor over here or there. It'll be back where we were solvent and solid in the mid to late 80s and early 90s before Marvel panicked because of Image's gains in market share. And people need to remember when Image had 16% of the market and Marvel and DC's market share dropped from like 40 down to like 30 each back then as Image was launching. People need to remember Image's early market share percentages was kind of built on a false pretense. It was all based on early marketing stratagem through Wizard and through other advertising, so that the numbers were there on paper, but a lot of books were shipping late. A lot of books weren't shipping at all, and the sales weren't actually there. That's why, we had this kind of implosion in the early 90s was because of all that content that never actually, it was ordered and retailers got stuck with it, but it didn't actually sell. And that's why so many stores went out of business. Now, as far as Diamond working as a bank, this is true, but only for some accounts. one of the other distributors, who was I can't name the name of the distributor, but they were owned by Kevin Clady. When Diamond wouldn't float them as a bank and they were going out of business, Kevin would come in and liquidate the stores and get all their back stock. Okay. And instead of letting the banks foreclose on their stores and just collect everything and sell everything at auction and get whatever they could get out of it, he would pay them the liquidation costs, flip it on eBay, resell it to other retailers around the world at discount, and give these retailers enough money to pay off all their debts and get out from under everything. They wouldn't have the store anymore, but they wouldn't be losing their homes. They wouldn't be losing, basically everything to this situation at the time. This was around in 95 to 98, roughly, when this was going on, when Kevin was starting his company. And Kevin offered at the time a deal with with about something close to 800 different comic shops out of the 3,000 that were around at the time. He offered them a guaranteed deal with all these different publishers that Diamond didn't carry, and then some that Diamond did carry. He was offering minimum guaranteed orders to us publishers to carry X amount of copies. In other words, if he was going to publish my book, he would have guaranteed me a minimum order of, say, 3,000 copies. Now, some of the bigger name people would get a minimum of 10,000. Like if it was a Dark Horse book, they get a minimum of 10,000 copies per title, per issue, every month. But because of the exclusivity deals, and because the retailers basically thumbed their noses at Kevin, the other larger group, because 800 is only about a fourth of the retailers, it's not enough to really, it was enough to start with, but it wasn't enough to really get it going for everybody. A lot of retailers and a lot of publishers wouldn't go with them. So what he ended up doing was just sticking with comic book liquidation of the stores. And he bought out about a third of the store's stock in this country at one time and had it in warehouses. And he sold his distribution group in, I want to say 2015 or 2016. He still owns a small store in Tifton, Georgia, but, that's what he did because nobody would work with him. Mm-hmm. And so once you realize that this huge marketplace is really a raindrop in the ocean of what our comic book industry really is, and that retailers can wrap their brains around this and start learning about the rest of the market out there, and that they don't have this content and they need to get it in their stores, then the argument that Johnston's making is something of a straw man's argument. The real questions that need to be asked are, who's going to pick up the rest of the content that's been ignored for the past 20 to 25 years and market it to both retailers and the fans and the public at large? How do we re-educate and retrain the comics retail community to better understand their role in the business as our marketing and sales force for the medium as a whole, so that they aren't always screaming at us about how that when the books don't sell, it's the publisher or creator's job to market the books better so that they can sell them. We are your, well, here we go. We're your equal business partners. You need to market the book better so that we can order it. Does that make sense to anybody? No. If you're our equal business partners, as publishers and creators, it's our job to produce the content in a timely fashion, try and make it as entertaining as possible. And yes, we do some marketing, but on a grand scale and on the local, we can't be everywhere at once. And so we need the retailers to understand that that's their part of the partnership. If they're our business partners, they have to handle the marketing and the marketing side and sales side of our books for us. That doesn't mean we don't give them tools to work with and try to work with them and help them do it, but they still got to be the ones to take ultimate responsibility in their local communities. And a lot of retailers just don't see it that way. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we face. And I think that's why they're fighting DC over this, because they don't want to do the work. Lastly, another thing that's been whispering around the rumor mill is that DC may be shifting it to a digital only first, and then later trades collected. And that means Lunar and UCS are only temporary until DC has completed that shift in format and corporate structure. And I wouldn't be surprised if that does happen. It's not going to happen in the immediate term. If that happens, it's going to happen probably another 2 to 5 years, probably, if they go that direction. It's not going to happen overnight. But if they do that, Marvel's going to follow suit, which means everybody else is going to be following suit. And what we know as a traditional brick and mortar comic book shop is going to be either a completely different animal, or it's going to stop existing, one or the other. And that means something that retailers need to be aware of that, so that if they want to stay in business and not just be a comic book trade collections when those trades come out, if they want to have weekly shipments, they want to have content that's going to be something that they can market to the people, they're going to have to start looking outside of what Diamond carries and figure out how to get that into their stores. Otherwise, they're going to go bye-bye. And that pretty much says everything I've got to say about the DC situation right now. I know we kind of covered some of it before in the past. I could go a little bit more into detail on the history of what happened when each of those other distributors, what year it was, and what was going on, and what retailers actually said or did. But I think if I did, it would just aggravate viewers more and more and get them more anti-retailer. And retailers have enough to deal with right now. So I'm going to err on the side of caution and not create any more strife in that respect. But I think just based on what I've talked about tonight and in the past on this show, people realize that this is just something that was going to happen the way it's happened, one way or another. It was inevitable. So rather than, feel complete sympathy and sorriness for your retailer who's going, well, what am I going to do now? And I got to do extra paperwork, and I got to pay extra shipping and handling, and this is wrong and that's wrong. Make them understand that this is what retail business is, because most but retail businesses in general use multiple distribution channels. They have multiple shipment days for their books or their products in general. There's stores that have 4 and 5 delivery days a week, from different companies and different products. So, if they can do it, there's really no reason why a comic book shop can't do it. It's just they don't want to. So let's go ahead and move on into our reviews this week. And we'll start with our classic book of the week. And that is Grunts, number 1 from 1987. The publisher is Mirage Studios. It was 68 pages with various writers and artists. The cover is by Michael Dooney. The genre is anthropomorphic war and science fiction. And what it's about is this is an anthology series with 12, count them, 12 short stories about war, all featuring anthropomorphic, in other words, animals as people, as the soldiers, sometimes fighting animal to animal, sometimes fighting against aliens, featuring the work of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle creators Eastman and Laird, other TMNT artists, TMNT being Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, for those who aren't recognizing that breakdown short name. But Other artists who worked on that series, like Jim Lawson, Michael Dooney, and others, as well as other creators who didn't necessarily work on Turtles, but worked at Mirage for a time, like Stephen Bissett and Mark Bode. It's recommended for ages 13 and up. I gave it 4 stars out of 5. And we'll take a quick look here at the artwork. The cover by Bodie, by Michael Dooney, I just loved. That's one of the reasons why I grabbed it, because I just love the painting that he did with this. This was done as an oil painting. Has kind of like a bear guy with the big gun in the back holding a dog person that's kind of wounded, and then the rabbit in the front with the shooting. So it's just kind of a cool thing there. But this is a black and white book. And this is FAC 11. This was done by Eastman and Talbot and Levine. This is some more of the FAC 2 storyline. The female, her fighter partner gets killed, and she's basically being hunted down by the other people. She starts wasting them away, and she pretty much ends all of them except one, who they basically send a nuke down to blow them all up at the end of the story. But it's kind of a cool thing there. This one's by Jim Lawson. It's called The Lucky One. Artwork reminds me a little bit of Walt Simonson. Kind of has the same kind of geometrical shaping, and the clouds look a little bit like how, and explosions look a little bit like how Walt did stuff or does stuff. So I like that a little bit. In this particular story, the lucky one is the guy who survives those explosions that you're seeing out in the open, and all of his friends get killed in the bombs there. And I can't remember if that is. I guess you could say it's the. I'm trying to think of like an IED stuff rather than bombs from above. Mm-hmm. And he's the only survivor, and there's other stuff going on in that particular story where he sees like a ghost version of the enemy, or another ghost version of one of his friends, and he's kind of like, he ends up being wounded very badly, but still the only survivor, and he calls himself the lucky one because they're all trapped as ghosts or something like that. I'm not going to quite tell the whole stories on these because I don't want to give away some of the fun of finding and reading it. The horror is from Bella, and this is duck animals versus some sort of scaly aliens. So it's like, this is kind of fun. And I don't know if you can tell this from on looking at this, but almost everything that you see, all the color shading and stuff, is all pointillism, where just little dot with a pen just going over and over and over, and making all those shades is just amazing work on that stuff there. So I was really impressive work there. And then there was the lesson, which is a tale of the Triceraton Marines. If you don't know who the Triceratons are, that's one of the enemies of the Turtles. And he gives a little bit of the history of how he lost his horn and why the horn is his knife handle. It's written by Peter Laird and drawn by Peter Laird, inks by Ryan Brown, with letters by Steve Levine. And then Mark Bode has Turtle Troop, which is a typical Mark Bode funny little war comic thing. So that book was $1.75 cover price at the time. I think you can regularly find it around, if you look hunting for it, for around $4. And you can probably find it online and read it for free if you look hard enough. I'm not going to say where, but I know it's out there. So if you want to be cheap and you can't, or you just can't find it locally in your comic book back issue bins, you can find it online to read. Let's see what else we got this week from comic reviews. We're going to go ahead and go to DC. And this week I got 2 comics. Got Amethyst #3 for $3.99. Publisher DC. Writer artist is Amy Reeder. The colorist is Marissa Louise. The genre is fantasy, and it was released on June 10th. Last issue, we learned that Dark Lord Opal had imprisoned Princess Amethyst's parents and the entire kingdom in Amethyst Crystal. Princess Amy attempts to gain allies from the other kingdoms of Gemworld, who all turn her down, save for Aquamarine, who sends the prince to join her as she makes her way to the Topaz Kingdom, and that's the guy on the in the water riding the horned fish in the immediate foreground on the cover. When they get to the Topaz Kingdom, she learns that Opal has ordered her capture as a rogue traitor, which is partly why the other kingdoms hadn't offered aid. Topaz lets her and her friends leave and escorts the band. That would be the multi-gem users, which are of the gem world, which is forbidden in gem world by law now, to Princess Amy's lands as sanctuary as she moves onward to rescue her people. It's recommended for ages 13 and up. 4 out of 5 stars. Good stuff. But before we go on there, Mark Andrew Smith says, Mark Bodie did 2 of my favorite Turtle series, the one in Egypt and the Bruce Lee issue. Jim Lawson did an amazing job on his Return to New York storyline. Yeah, these guys did a lot of really cool stuff on Turtle stuff back in the day. I'm not really a huge Turtles guy, to be honest. I don't think I ever really read the Mark Bodie Turtles. Lawson, I remember seeing some stuff. I think I remember like one issue that had sort of a Frankenstein type swamp monster or something that the Turtles fought. And then I think that's the only one I had of Lawson's for a while. And then I think I had Michael Zulli's stuff. Right, those were like 29 to 32 issues, 29 to 32. I think I had for a while. If I still have them, I don't know. But yeah, those guys, that whole Mirage Studios was awesome back in the 80s. So back to our Amethyst. Sorry I didn't see your comments earlier, Mark. But let's take a quick look at the artwork. These are the first 3 pages of the Amethyst storyline en route. She's explaining to the Queen of Aquamarine what the situation is. They had an argument in the previous issue, and her son, the prince, is having a conniption as usual. And basically, she says the best way to do this is handle it and put Aquamarine with her, and neither one of them want it. But of course, he ends up going. So it's a fun little thing there. But overall, it's just kind of, I won't call it a filler issue. It is moving the plot forward. But I hate to say it, but this is like issue 3. I think it's a 6-issue run. So we're just basically halfway through the story is all. And, unfortunately, when we get these kind of stories today, it's chapter fic. It's not story issue by issue by issue of story. that has a full story and then gives you the next, lead into the next one. So it is what it is, but so that's more of an issue with how we produce comics today rather than anything that Reader herself did. Next book is Batman: The Adventures Continue, number 1, $3.99. Publisher is DC Comics. Writers are Alan Burnett and Paul Dini. The interior artist is Ty Templeton, but Dave Johnson did the cover that you see here. There was also an alternative cover by Dan Mora that looks kind of like a Jim Lee cover. Garbage. Not so much garbage. How do I put this? It's not appropriate cover for what the book is. There was no reason to do that. Just stick with what you had. Is what I'm saying. At least Johnson's in the same vein as what the DC animated look is supposed to be. Colorist is Monica Kubina. Genre is superhero. Digitally, this book was released in April of 2020, and there's been a lot of reviews of it because of that. And not very good ones from what I had seen, but I think people are just being ridiculous about the reviews. But it was released this week, June 10th, 2020. And what it's about is Batman attempts to stop a giant robot that breaks into Wayne Enterprises to steal special technology. He learns that Lex Luthor is in town and suspects that he may have something to do with the break-in. But where is Superman? Nowhere to be found. Batman's instincts lead him to an airfield where he discovers the robot and the stolen goods, only to be blindsided by Lex in his battle armor. Batman realizes that Superman is trapped inside the robot, being used as the robot's power source. Can he stop Lex and save his friend? It's recommended for all ages, and I gave it a 5-star rating. And that's basically because I'm not going to say Paul Dini and Alan Burnett can do no wrong, but it's a self-contained story, the way it should be, the way comics should be, in my opinion. It tells there's some plot line. It's not the perfect story by any means, but it's solid. It's there, and unless you really want to nitpick it, which a lot of people did because it was coming through digital and they didn't like digital comics. And you could tell that was their tone. They just didn't want to give it the praise it deserved, in my opinion. But I will. Unfortunately, I don't think I got any artwork for it because the stuff online was all broken up. I don't know what they did in the digital format. It looked like they gave like half the page and then half the page, which may be why people were so disappointed. I don't know. But the way it's formatted in the comic, it flows like a proper comic. So I don't have it with me at the moment, but it's typical Batman animated series from the 90s style stuff, which I've shown in the past in season 1 and early season 2. So if you're not familiar with that, you can look it up in my reviews in the past and you'll see what kind of artwork it was like. Now, because John was asking about this last week and this week, we'll go ahead and talk about Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing came out last year, and it's a complete series. It was 10 episodes, 489 minutes. It stars Crystal Reed, Andy Bean, Derek Mears, Jennifer Beals, Kevin Durand, Ian Ziering, Virginia Madsen, and Will Patton. It was developed by Gary Dauberman and Mark Verheiden for all 10 episodes, based on the comics by Len Wein, Bernie Wrights, and Rick Veitch, Alan Moore, and Stephen Bissett. Moore and Veitch and Bissett aren't really credited. As you know, Moore isn't credited. That's how he wishes DC never credits him for anything. But I don't remember if Veitch and Bissett are mentioned or not. They should be if they aren't, but because they adapt stories that have to do with what those guys all kind of put into it. Anyway, they had actual writers for episodes: Conway Preston, Franklin Jin Rowe, Tanya Lotia, Noah Griffith, Daniel Stewart, Rob Fresco, Doris Egan, Aaron Marr, and Kay Reindl. The genre is supernatural horror. Now, the reason this series was only 10 episodes instead of the normal 13 is because after they ran the pilot, they got a lot of bad feedback or something, and DC or Time Warner didn't like the results, and they canceled the show uh, practically in mid-run. Probably around they were filming fourth or fifth episode, and they were told, "Well, you're done. Just finish this, what you've got already planned," which was up through episode 10, which was it kind of hurts the story in a little bit, and, because some of the subplots don't get addressed as a result. They truncate the plot of the story a little bit. But overall, if you can get past that and not go, well, what happened to this part of the story, then it's a really good show. And what it's about is when a mysterious and deadly plague strikes the town of Murray, Louisiana. Center for Disease Control Dr. Abby Arcane is sent to investigate her hometown. There she encounters biologist Alec Holland, who believes the disease might be connected to his work in a nearby swamp for powerful businessman Avery Sunderland, who has a history with Arcane herself. While visiting the swamp, Abby, Alec, and Deputy Matt Cable encounter a terrifying force that's much more than a mud-borne virus. Alec goes missing, but someone or something else appears. Swamp Thing, a creature born of the bog's mystical secrets. Is Swamp Thing Alec Holland transformed into a new creature, or is the creature something else entirely? And what is really going on with the sickness infecting the town? Can Abby discover the answers before dark forces, both supernatural and human in origin, silence her? This DVD is not rated, but recommended for mature audiences. And I gave it a 4 out of 5. And the reason I gave it a 4 out of 5 was, in fact, like I said, the season was cut short a little bit. You don't get all the answers that you probably should. There are some cool things in the story. Ian Ziering plays the Blue Devil. He's kind of like a subplot character, but it's some really interesting stuff with his character going on. The Phantom Stranger is in the show. Madame Xanadu is in the show. So there's it's all intertwined. And they do a very good job of hitting the bullet points of what Swamp Thing is, and what it's supposed to be, including a really cool adaptation of one of the most popular Swamp Thing stories, The Anatomy Lesson, which is just really, really cool stuff. And so, yeah, I would definitely give it, if John wants to see it, whether or not I'll let you borrow my DVDs or make you go buy your own, because really it's worth buying. But we'll see. But yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. And that's my DC reviews for this week. Let's see what else we got. Whoops. We got Adventure Man and Decorum. Here we go. Adventure Man number 1, $3.99. Publisher, of course, is Image Comics. The writer is Matt Fraction. The artists are Terry and Rachel Dotson. Genre is action adventure, pulp, noir, superhero type stuff, but mostly action adventure. It was released yesterday, June 10th, 2020. And what it's about is Claire Connell and her son Tommy are fans of the classic pulp fiction series Adventure Inc. or Adventure Man, a group of people with superpowers who protect the world from harm. She lives a quiet life as a single mother and bookstore owner passed down to her by her late mother. A mysterious woman enters her store and gives Claire a special tome, a new Adventure Inc. book that she hadn't seen before. And then the woman that came in the store is chased by shadow men out the back of the store. Claire tries to rescue the woman but fails. Confused as to what's going on, she takes the book home to her son, who realizes that there's something special about the book. But Claire ignores it, and now dark forces are coming for them and the book. It's a double-sized issue, 48 pages. For the $3.99, but it'll go back to normal size with issue number 2. It's recommended for ages 13 and up, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 rating. And the reason I did that was, for what's going on in 48 pages, is almost too. There's a lot of characters that are being introduced. The old pulp characters from the original book, Claire's family, who in a meta sort of way are kind of reflections of the characters in the Adventure Man pulp stories in their own way. And it kind of gives you, I don't want to say an obvious clue, but it's pretty apparent, I guess you could say. I'm not going to be surprised if her family becomes the new Adventure Inc. as a result, as the story progresses. But we'll see. Mm-hmm. And here's some of the artwork. And that's Adventure Man with the different characters that are his associates. And while they all have different abilities and superpowers without this, the vials that you see in his hands give them even more power. It basically, it's like super soldier serum or whatever. And they all drink it and they go fight the bad guys in the final battle. And in the Pulp Fiction story, it ends with them more or less dying in the Pulp Fiction story, and there's no more stories. And the son's like, what the heck is this? This is before they get the new tome. But basically, Claire's going to become the new Adventure Man in this. And like I said, I believe her family's going to take the place of the other characters and face the same villains modernized. Our next book is Decorum, number 2, $3.99, Image Comics. Jonathan Hickman and Mike Huddleston are the creators. Genre is science fiction. It was released yesterday. Like the cover art. But the truth is, honestly, this book just baffles me. It's supposed to be about a young girl who's a messenger. That's the girl with the headphones on, who's trying to save her brother from some sort of disease, and he's in a cryotube. And now she's a protege of an assassin who's the woman standing behind her. And there's other storylines going around running through it that Hickman's telling 6 stories at once. I keep seeing others heaping a ton of praise on this book, but I'm sorry, it's a complete and utter mess to me. Huddleston's the only reason to try and stick with the book because he's masterfully doing different art styles with each segment of different story. I would recommend the book for 16 and up, and I give it a 2-star rating just because the storylines are just all over the place. And I don't see where he's got not just stories, but he's got these like subtexts and stuff. And I know he does this in a lot of his comics, but it's just like one big cluster. And maybe when I get the whole book, the whole storyline and arc, and I can sit down and read all it whole, maybe it'll make more sense to me. But right now, it just isn't making sense issue by issue at all to me. Could be just me, but I gave it a 2. And here's some of the artwork. And all I've really done here is show 2 separate pages of different chapters to give you an idea of how different the artwork looks. And it's all the same artist. But, you know, I like the stuff on the right far more than the left, but, you know, it's just there, you know, as far as the stuff on the left. Stuff on the right looks really good. I'd like to see a whole comic done in this style. But, you know, there's like 4 or 5 other art styles that Huddleston uses in this book, though. And if, you know, in that sense, it impresses me. So if I had to say for the artwork, I would give it a 3.5, but the writing is just leaving me cold. Now, I did have another Image book this week called Stealth, but I didn't get a chance to review that one, so that'll be next week. And let's see what else we got from the other people this week. We got Dryad number 2 from Oni Press, $3.99. Writer is Kurt Wiebe. The artist is Justin Osterling. fantasy sort of breaking into science fiction, released yesterday, June 10th, 2020. What it's about is Raina and her friends unleash a group of other dimensional beings from a locked dimension door. Thinking they are demons, Rana tells her brother Griffin to flee and get their parents. Remember, their parents are former badass warrior and wizard. Griffin manages to escape and reach his parents, but only the mother warrior goes to rescue Rana. Only the demons aren't demons at all. Apparently, they're people from that Rana's mother knows, and the mother gets herself caught at the end of the issue. Recommended for ages 13 up. I give it 3 stars. I don't like. You saw the cover; it's nice looking fantasy stuff with Rana with her bow and arrow, and the thing behind her is kind of like this science fiction armory type thing. But what I didn't like was in the middle of the story, this warrior that her mom, who we've already shown is a badass with swords and knives and all this other stuff, and medieval, elven badass. First thing they do with her, now her daughter's in danger. Now she's got a freaking gun, with a bunch of weaponry and the sword. I don't mind having a wide blade sword, but I know it's popular with the manga stuff these days to do these little tiny little hilt, not hilt, handles for the swords. But come on, man, it's not practical. It's not realistic. Come on, do a sword right. Build a proper hilt on it and handle for the sword. And the next page is the wizard and the father and the son, and they're hiding a house instead of going and help to save the daughter. And I was just like, that's kind of why it got a 3, was that type of stuff. So not that keen on that one, but we'll keep going and maybe it'll get better. Our next book is Join the Future #2 from Aftershock Comics, $3.99. Writer is Zach Kaplan. The artist is Peter Kowalski. The colorist is Brad Simpson. Genre is science fiction. Released yesterday, June 10th. And what it's about is after an attack by high-tech mercenaries, a small community of Franklin vacates its township and starts moving its people to the city. Of course, these high-tech mercenaries came from the city because the city wants their lands and wants them as, well, basically Silent Green fuel. Anyway, this sends the mayor's strong-willed teenage daughter, Clementine Libby, on a quest of revenge and resistance as she challenges the city's control while trying to stay true to her small-town principles. But what will the corporate city-state do to get their way, and what price will Clementine pay for her rebellion? Recommended for ages 16 up, 3 stars. Early quick art. You can see there's Clementine holding her little brother. He's killed. The father's shooting back at them. They try to get out the back doors. She's escaping out into the woods. He gets taken out. And they also start taking out other civilians as well. So that one's a little bit of, it's definitely science fiction. There's other stuff in going on there. Kowalski's art's okay. His style is not that scratchy. It's very, his line weight's very similar all the way throughout, and it kind of flattens the artwork for me a little bit. But the coloring is helping create depth perception there. So I just wish Kowalski would be a little bit more, learn to differentiate his line weight and create more depth perception visually that way. But other than that, it's okay. Storyline for 2 issues so far, it's kind of slow paced. That's why I gave it a 3 star. Next book is The Kill Lock, 5 of 6 from IDW Comics. The writer-artist is Livio Ramondelli. It's $3.99. Genre science fiction, released yesterday, June 10th, 2020. What it's about, for those who don't remember, is there's 4 robots of different kinds: the artisan, the wraith, the laborer, and the kid, who are connected by the Kill Lock program as they travel the stars, knowing that if one dies, they all do. 3 of them, the artisan, the wraith, and the laborer, have actually committed crimes, and they deserve to Kill Lock, but the kid is supposed to be innocent of any wrongdoing, so they're trying to find a cure for the program to save him. In this penultimate issue, the laborer and wraith are battling their counterparts and being destroyed while the artisan matches wits with his own twin. And we see a twist at the end of the story, which will leave the reader guessing and wanting to know what happens in the final issue. Recommended for ages 13 and up. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Now, I think I've given Kill Lock 5 stars in the past, so part of the reason I gave it a 4 this time instead of a top-notch score had to do more with I didn't like what was hinted at the end of the cliffhanger of the story, but I'm not really sure what happened, because if something happened, it happened off camera, so we don't really know if it happened or not yet. So we'll wait until next month, the next issue, for the final issue, to see how it comes out. But here's the artwork. And this is the one with the smoking version of him is the evil twin versus the artisan and the little kids, small there. And basically the counterpart's saying, yeah, I took the guy, the kid, their version of the kid, took his brain processor core out and put it in my own head and turned his body in that light above, which is real fun when the kid's sitting there listening to the conversation. But, this is just some of the artwork, and it's very nice digital color painted work by Livio Ramondelli. And I'd definitely recommend either getting the miniseries or the trade. The trade has been solicited. I think it was solicited this month to be released in August, I think. So you might want to look for it in the trade if you haven't gotten the single issues. Our next book is No One's Rose #2 from Vault Comics, $3.99. Writers are Zach Thompson, not Thompsons, and Emily Horn. Artist is Alberto Albuquerque. Colorist is Raul Angulo. The genre is science fiction. It was released this week, June 10th. What it's about. 10 Gavrilo, or Gavrilo, I'd say Rio, Gavrilo, is captured after terrorists bombed a parade from last issue. And she is stripped of her rank and job, while her brother, Saren, is introduced to the Drizil, who are the so-called terrorists, and indoctrinated into their camp. The council has dishonorably discharged 10, is informed by 10's mentor that they need to reinstate her to use her as a martyr or bait to trap the Drizil. Meanwhile, one of 10's lab experiments, a new tree, is growing at an exponential rate and might be able to solve the environmental issues they all face if the council will let it happen. Recommended for ages 16 and up, 4 stars. Now, to be clear of everything, for those of you who don't remember the first issue, they're on a world where basically the environment is all acid rain, toxic stuff, and they live in this one area that has a special tree that gives all the oxygen for everybody in the world. And they have little pockets of civilization the higher you go up in the tree and down and so forth. And the Drizil are wanting to basically make it equal rights for them because they're the ones who do all the laboring and stuff like that. So it's got that whole racial and societal tensions that are common right in that place in what we're talking about in society today. So it has that kind of relevance as a story to it. And in this particular story, she loses her rank, 10 does, as a junior scout type and scientist, and she's basically found the way to create the tree that will replace the tree that they've got, and basically build it so that everybody can have their own trees and save the world. And the council may not want to do that and let her do it because that'll take away their control over society, of course. Sound familiar? So anyway, that's what's going on there. As far as artwork, I'm not really sure if we have any. No, we don't. It's just the cover today. So our next book is Icarus number 3, Project Icarus number 3, from Black Box Comics for $3.99. The story is by Andy Owens. The art is by Patrick Blaine. The colors are Teo Gonzalez. The letters are Desi Ciente. And the cover art is by Blaine as well. Urban Science Fiction Crime came out yesterday. Former police corrections officer Max Green and his associate Liz search for clues into the Blackfire Corporation, which was the corporation that he had worked for as security guard before he got messed up and got superpowers. Max has put his healing ability to the test against an opponent who can not only control, but can actually turn into living fire. What Nefarious planned as a slasher, which is the serial killer from the first 2 issues, have for our heroes. Recommended for ages 15 and up, 3 stars. Artwork's a little bit lesser this time around. I don't know. I think Owens is inking Blaine on the interiors, but I don't know. There's just something missing here. We'll take a quick look at this. And you guys can compare it to previous episodes where I reviewed this series. But it just, I don't know. The colors are a little bit, they're there, but they're just, I don't know. A lot of the lighting and shadows just don't seem to go with what I think it should be. I think is part of the problem. I don't know, but I don't know. It just, the art just seems very flat and very one-dimensional to me. I don't know. Am I the only one who sees that? But anyway, yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed with it. That's why I gave it a 3 as far as that goes. And the story is just there. It's we'll see how far it goes, but it's okay. Our next book is Shapes, 5 out of 6, issue number 5 of 6 rather. $3.99 from Cave Pictures Publishing. Writers are Jason Brubaker and Rick Recadal. The artist is Jason Brubaker. The colors is Adrian Martefio. Some of these names. Let's call him Adrian Mam. Anyway, genre is science fiction urban adventure. And June 10th, 2020, came out this week. What it's about is Trip and his friends Zeno and Chaz, along with Trip's avatar buddies from the video game they were trapped in, realize who and what Black Hat is and what he intends to do, which is destroy the world and replace it with a new one, basically rip off of the Matrix idea. Trip also figures out what the Jaggeds are, which is the same as Jaegers from Pacific Rim, and as 3 avatar buddies from the game are to merge into a giant fighting robot that he rides inside and controls. Now, off to the final battle against the villainous Black Hat. Ages 13 and up, 2 stars. Main reason it's 2 stars is it's just a cluster of cliched, we've been here, done that, nothing unique here. I want a story, I mean, the art's okay, but do something that hasn't been done. That's all I can say, I just, here's the art. That's where the 3 avatars form into. One's a spirit type, one's a a glob, orange glob, and one's a metal-like type creature, and it's how they form into that thing. And he's got this little mini sword that he's holding. And yeah, we kind of feel like we're together, but we aren't quite right. And the girl says, hey, you need to go ride inside him. Oh, yeah, I see what you're talking about. Now we'll go. Now I'm ready. Now we can do something. So I just like, But, maybe because it's been so long since an issue came out, or maybe it's just, like I said, it's just too obviously derivative of other things. I just not caring for it as much as I did in the past. Unfortunately, that is the last of our reviews for the evening. So, that being said, next week, we will review Rascal by Jean-Luc Deglin. Just got this week. I just haven't had a chance to read it. It's from Top Shelf. We'll review that. We will review Something is Killing the Children, Volume 1 from Boom Studios. We can get that to read. And yes, Santos, I know I didn't review Volume 2 of Black Science. I'm going to review all of Black Science 1 through 9. I know I reviewed one recently. I'm going to review the whole run, 1 through 9 volumes, next week. I've read through Volume 6, and I realized it'd just be better to just do all the volumes. So that's part of what we'll review next week. And we'll also hopefully get some more guests on the show. I don't know who yet. Still waiting to hear back for next week. And so until then, again, happy birthday to John Norris. And, we'll see you guys soon. Before we leave, one last time, let you guys know, again, we're part of the copyright. We abide by the copyright regulations, and this episode of Quoth Raven is intended for 16 and up. It is intended to be used for adults and informing them of said content of comics to researchers, consumers, in service of their youth, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, teachers, librarians, and others. We have TV 16 and up. If you want to reach me, you can reach me on Facebook at lewis.brightraven, DeviantArt at deviantart.com/brightraven, here on YouTube at Quoth the Raven, Lewis Brightraven, Gmail, Quoth the Raven, LBR72 at gmail.com, or if you must, at Yahoo at lewisbrightraven at yahoo.com. The podcast is normally on Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. See you next week, folks.